Perfect. So, hi everyone. As Taylor said, I'm Arthur Moses or AJ Moses. I'm a soil conservationist with NRCS out of the Avondale office, which is a West Phoenix suburb. And I'm going to be talking to you about getting started with NRCS today. All right, there we go. So a quick overview of what I'm going to be covering here. First, I'll be reviewing the most common NRCS programs that producers apply for. These would also be the ones most applicable for new and beginner farmers. I'll highlight the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP, program most of you have heard of before and was mentioned earlier in a previous presentation. And then I'll break down what to expect during that application and planning process. And finally, I'll touch on your our EQIP Urban program, which many of you will also probably qualify for if you're in one of our metro areas. But first, I just want to give a quick introduction to NRCS. So NRCS is a non-regulatory technical agency. So that means we aren't in the business of enforcing laws or taking action against producers. We're simply here as a tool and a resource to help you improve conservation on your farm. At NRCS, we work with a variety of organizations and individuals to address resource concerns. So tribes, local governments, natural resource conservation districts, and many more. We also operate in all 50 states and several territories. So if you know other producers interested in getting assistance, encourage them to contact their local NRCS office. So now to get into a few of the most popular programs here at NRCS. Starting off with the foundation of conservation assistance here is our main technical program, and that being Conservation Technical Assistance, or CTA, as you might hear it be called. So the goal of Conservation Technical Assistance is to use sound science to help producers address resource concerns on their operation and lands. So the core of this program is working with the producer to create an individualized conservation plan that would allow for the implementation of practices to address any resource concerns you might be facing. I also want to reiterate that this is technical assistance, and so there's no financial obligations or agreements associated with this program. And so now when it kind of comes to the meat, so to speak, of financial assistance, here at NRCS, we have two main programs. And this is by no means exhaustive, and I'll drop a link in the chat once I'm done here to some other programs that we have. But since these are the two main programs that would be concerning to producers, and particularly new and beginner producers, first we have our Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. And then we also have the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, as I mentioned before, or EQIP. So EQIP is a cost sharing program aimed at working together with producers to invest in the conservation of natural resources and agricultural improvements. And for now, I'll leave that there because I'm going to go much more in depth into the EQIP program a little later in this presentation. As for the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, it's essentially a 5-year contract program, which would be considered sort of the graduating step from EQIP. So essentially with CSP, it means you're already meeting priority resource concern goals, and you're looking to further enhance or improve your conservation performance on your property. So this program might be for you if, say, you've gone through EQIP and made improvements, and you want to take those improvements to the next level. And so while most of these, while these are the most common forms of assistance producers seek, of course, we do offer other programs, which, as I said before, I'll drop a link in the chat to that a little bit later. So now I'm going to touch on getting started with actually applying to get assistance here at NRCS. So the first step with getting started with us is essentially just to contact your local service center. So you can do this via phone, email, or in person. And I have a little asterisk here just to denote that we do follow CDC guidance when it comes to things like COVID. And if you share this with individuals in other states, or if you're watching this a little bit later, just know that different states and offices might have different in-person guidelines based on the COVID rates in the local area. But another helpful point here is that both the Farm Service Agency, or FSA, and NRCS are typically located in the same office buildings. So as you saw in the previous presentation with Fred, the FSA office is also located here in Avondale. So we share the same building. So this is helpful as you will essentially be working with both agencies as you get started applying for financial assistance with NRCS. When it comes to actually locating the address or contact information for your local NRCS office, if it doesn't happen to be Avondale, you can use the link here on the screen, which will take you to our service center locator. This map is interactive, so you can choose your state and then your county. You'll be able to find your local office along with emails and phone number information to employees out of that office. And again, that link will be in the chat here a little later. So once you get in contact with your local service center, you'll have the opportunity to speak with an NRCS employee about your farming and conservation goals. From there, they will let you know the next steps. And a little later in this presentation, I will go through an abridged timeline for that actual process from application to contracting. But the first step, and I would say this is very important, and I would highly recommend you do, is to begin the process of establishing USDA records through the Farm Service Agency. So establishing records with FSA does a few things. It helps us to better design and track your conservation plan using our tools, and it determines your eligibility to participate in NRCS financial programs. And then, of course, as you heard earlier, it also gives you the opportunity to potentially participate in Farm Service Agency financial programs as well, and the things that they offer. So getting established with them is a good kind of beginning co-step, I would say, especially if you're seeking financial assistance from USDA agencies. When you do speak to Farm Service Agency, their representative will help you establish your records and your eligibility for USDA programs, including those like EQIP and the Conservation Stewardship Program. As you can see here, there are several forms that you will have to fill out, and they will be able to walk you through all of these and get you established with a farm and tract number if you don't already have one. The eligibility determination process can take several weeks, so I highly recommend you incorporate speaking to FSA in the beginning when you initially contact NRCS. So when it comes to the actual NRCS application side, so you've decided you're seeking financial assistance and you're wondering how to apply. When you conduct that initial contact with NRCS, a planner will be able to connect you with the CPA 1200. So that's our program application. And so submitting an application doesn't obligate you to anything. It's simply saying you wish to seek financial assistance with NRCS. This is also another instance where I'd like to reiterate the importance of at least establishing a farm and tract number with FSA, as we actually use their system to look up your information and enter these applications. So if you've previously established records, just contact them and make sure your information is up to date. So on the NRCS side, we also go through our own eligibility check when it comes to verifying you for our financial programs. And so the first step is verifying that FSA has completed their eligibility determination. And if you are leasing land, we also have our CPA 1257, as you can see here on the right. So this is a landowner concurrence form, which provides proof that you have the authority to install any conservation practices that you and your planner decide on that leased land. And then the second thing we verify would be irrigation history. And so now this only applies if you're seeking funding to implement irrigation practices. So say you're only looking to get a high tunnel and crop rotation assistance, you don't actually need to verify this. But if you're seeking to install that high tunnel with drip irrigation, for example, then we do check this. And typically you can just use things such as a water bill or water orders, or we can even accept a signed producer statement. And essentially what we're looking for is to see that you at least attempted irrigation on this property for at least 2 of the last 5 years. And so now, as I promised earlier in the presentation, I want to give a little bit more information about the actual EQIP program, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and also go through that abridged timeline from application to when you actually get paid. So this is by no means, an exhaustive as far as anything that may happen during your specific case, but you can consider this a general order of operations. So first things first, as I said before, we establish and ensure your eligibility requirements are met. As you can see here on the screen, are you a producer? Are you highly erodible land and wetland compliant? And does your AGI meet the threshold rules? So these requirements are met through those FSA forms I showed you earlier. And of course, anything else FSA might need to establish your records. So ultimately, they determine and can help you with those requirements. And then once again, the only thing we do on our side is that landowner concurrence, so that CPA 1257 form, and then of course, irrigation history, and that's applicable if you're working on irrigation in your conservation plan. So next, to give you some general information about the EQIP program, its goal is to address natural resource concerns. It's a cost sharing program. And that means you or your entity pays a portion, and then NRCS pays a portion. So NRCS's portion can be up to $450,000 during the life cycle of the current farm bill, which I believe expires in 2023. So NRCS uses a 9-step planning process to develop your conservation plan. So that's that individualized plan where the NRCS employee will come out to your field, survey everything, and I have a little bit more about that on the next slide. But then of course, the producer has the final decision on what options they're willing to implement. So we, as I said in the beginning of this, we're a voluntary agency. So while we'll give you options and give you alternatives, that final decision rests with you. So this is a little bit about the 9-step planning process that we utilize for conservation planning here at NRCS. As you can see here, the first 3 steps: identify the problems and opportunities, determine objectives, and inventory resources, are about determining your challenges, your goals, and the benchmark conditions on your property. Steps 4 through 6, analyze resource data, formulate alternatives, and evaluate alternatives, are about analyzing the data to form solutions and alternatives to address those resource concerns we identified in the first 3 steps. And then of course, steps 7 through 9, make decisions, implement the plan, and then evaluate the plan, are the decision-making and implementation steps where the producer determines what's the right fit for you and your operation, and then is it working once we implement that. So what can you expect during the EQIP application, planning, and contracting process? As I promised earlier, let's go a little bit into that abridged kind of timeline for applying for EQIP. So first, the producer, you've contacted your local office, you've decided to submit an application for EQIP, that's great. So we accept applications year-round on a rolling basis, so you can apply at any time. So NRCS will schedule a field visit to learn a little bit more about your property and establish benchmarks. So that's those first 3 steps again. Concurrently, the producer will be working on either, establishing your FSA records if you don't already have them, or updating them if you do. After the beginning of each new fiscal year, NRCS will announce a financial assistance sign-up period. So that typically ends in December or January. So if you submit an application after the sign-up period ends, then you're typically deferred until the next sign-up period, which is usually the following fiscal year. However, in the meantime, we can and we still will work on your conservation plan, come out to your field visit and get that ball rolling. So like I said before, you can apply at any time. However, we do have a priority deadline. And so if you apply before that, you're enrolled into that sign-up period. And if you apply after that date, then you're just deferred until the next sign-up period automatically. So once all your paperwork is covered, we visited your property, we work up an individualized conservation plan and discuss this plan with you, the producer, to ensure that this meets your vision, and we offer you any applicable alternatives. This is where you will get some additional paperwork from NRCS if you haven't already done so. So this will be the things like the landowner concurrence I mentioned earlier, banking information to set up direct deposit and things like that. And then, your planner will help you select from over 170 conservation practices to address the resource concerns. So anything from soil health to air quality, irrigation, water efficiency, and plant productivity, and a lot more things. And there's an exhaustive list of all of those practices online. We can drop that in the chat a little bit later as well. So once that sign-up period is closed, NRCS will assess your application and competitively rank it among other applications received during that sign-up period. So we consider things such as benchmark conditions versus your planned conditions, as well as the state's priority goals as far as resource concerns go. And so that will essentially be a few months after that initial sign-up period. So we're looking at about 3 to 4 months after that sign-up period closing, that your application will essentially be assessed and then ranked. And then, so if you're selected for funding, your local office will typically notify you that you've been pre-approved, and then work with you to build a cost-sharing contract. So if it's not already done, this is also typically where your local office will submit your cultural resources reviews, and our archaeological team and engineering team will work on any designs or the required archaeological reviews for the site that you're planning to put in any practices. So once all the engineering and cultural resources reviews are completed and all other paperwork is signed and also completed, your local field office will give you the green light to begin practice construction. So it's important to note that you must wait until after the office clears you to begin construction before you actually begin the construction of any of these conservation practices that are on your plan. And that's because we cannot actually pay you for practices if you begin them before we clear you to. So it's very important that you make sure you wait for that. And also, as you can see down at the bottom, that sign-up period closing again in that December, January period to your actual contract obligation, which it varies from year to year, but typically around somewhere around June is almost a 6 to 7 month kind of time scale. And so it's also not a bad rule of thumb to build in some other cushion for engineering if you're going through third parties, cultural resources reviews, if you happen to be next to a cultural site or historical site or have historical structures on your property. So these are just other things to be aware about. So when you're applying for our financial resource programs, it's not a 2-month turnaround to where you get paid. It is kind of a lengthy process. However, you stay the course. We're definitely here to help you out. And so once the producer has finished construction, so we cleared you, you finished construction, you'll let us know, your local NRCS office that contract item is completed. So from that initial obligation period, we ask that at least one practice be scheduled and completed within 12 months of that initial contract obligation in June. So say your contract obligation is June 2022, so that's this year in a few months. We'd say for 12 months, so June 2023, we ask that at least one practice be scheduled and completed by June 2023. And so once that's completed, we'll come out and certify the practice, and then the producer will then get paid the cost share amount based on that practice. So some practices are by square foot, some are by acreage. So the amount all depends on what you're actually installing. So contracts are paid out on a per practice basis. So if you have a contract with a high tunnel and a pump and a pipeline, and you've only installed the pump and the pipeline, that's what we will come out and certify, and that's what you will get paid for. And then once your high tunnel is completed, constructed, then we'll come back out and we'll certify that as well, and then you'll be paid for that. So I wanted to touch on a few opportunities for historically underserved groups when working with NRCS. And since these groups were mentioned in earlier FSA presentations, I'm not going to rehash the definitions, but you can see them here on the slide. But I will make the distinction that when applying for assistance as an entity, all members must meet the requirements to certify that particular historically underserved category. And so what I kind of mean by that is, if you are, denoting that you are a veteran, farmer, for example, and you're applying as like an LLC and there's multiple owners, so all members of that entity would have to qualify independently as a veteran farmer, not just one person. And the only exception to that is our socially disadvantaged category, of which at least 50% of the entity must be owned by a member of one of those listed communities. So again, American Indian, Alaskan Natives, Asian, Blacks or African Americans, Native Hawaiians or Pacific Islanders, or Hispanic. And so the other two main points that I wanted to bring up when it comes to these groups is that you have two additional options when it comes to payment. So the first one is an advance payment to help cover the cost of materials. And then the second one is enhanced cost share rate, which means NRCS will pay more for practices. And so your planner will automatically kind of apply the enhanced payment rates when they're working up your conservation plan, but you do have to request advance payment. And that's also has additional timeline stipulations attached to it, and your local office can discuss that with you, and you all can determine if that is the correct course of action for your operation. And so finally, I'm going to touch on the EQIP Urban initiative that you've heard about a little bit earlier. And so this is just a little bit through kind of the NRCS side, and then I'll wrap things up here. So EQIP Urban is still just the EQIP program. There's no special application. And in fact, a single application will cover you as far as applying for both traditional and urban ranking pools when it comes time to assess and rank your application. So the only special requirement for urban is that your property resides within one of the 4 listed kind of metro areas. So that being Phoenix metro area, Tucson metro area, Flagstaff metro area, or the Prescott Valley area. And the goal of this program is to better serve, our diverse farming communities and the growing, urban farmer population. As you all have heard several times today already, that our urban farmers are growing steadily. And this really does help, with supplying local food security for our communities, as well as protecting our local resources. And so that's just kind of a geo-linked sort of funding pool. So if you're located in those areas, we'll be able to get you set up as far as urban. And another thing I want to note about it, just before I move on, is that with the urban program, so this year we actually had a separate sign up, and typically that sign up, at least in as far as FY22 goes, was ended in February. So again, you can still apply for that if you're interested in applying for the EQIP Urban program. And then again, like I said, once you apply after that priority sign up, you just defer it into the next one. But we'll still come out, we'll still meet with you, we'll still make a plan for you and go through that process to help you out. So here I just have listed a few conservation practices, and this is by no means, exhaustive of all the practices. As I said before, we have over 170 practices that we can offer to your property. But a lot of these are ones that are popular with our urban communities. And of course, a lot of these would also apply to traditional producers as well. So high tunnels, irrigation management, applying micro irrigation if you want to switch from flood to sprinklers or flood to drip irrigation. So even if you're irrigating, your property with a water hose, right? And you want to apply drip irrigation, we can help you with that. And so, like I said before, we'll drop a link for those practices in the chat. And that's just based on your resource concern. So what you're having issues with is what we're here to help you with. So in summary, all of our programs in NRCS are voluntary. You can apply whenever is right for you. We do have a traditional sign-up period. And again, those are typically announced on our media channels, including farmers.gov, which many of you are probably familiar with. So you can get your application in before that fiscal year cutoff. Also, you should plan for about a 6-month process from the time of the official sign-up period closing to actually having a finalized contract. So if you decide to apply in, say, August, just know that the official sign-up period for FY23, for example, might not close until January 2023. So that 6-month period is from that, not from the time that you actually sign up. And then also remember, you are paid after practices are certified. And so each practice you put in, we can come out and make sure that you're getting paid for that. And then the only exception to that, again, would be the HU categories, applying for that advance payment. And so all of our financial programs require that you meet eligibility criteria. And so while you will be working with NRCS in the field, and we'll be the ones coming out to make sure that everything's going good on your property, make sure you touch base with FSA. And you've heard it several times here before, but FSA is really going to be the ones to get your records established, and they're also going to have their own programs through loans and other things that can be helpful or that you might find helpful later. So even just applying through them is kind of like, okay, I'm getting started. It helps us on our side to be able to locate your property and to kind of use our geospatial tools to create a conservation plan. And then it could potentially help you if you decide, hey, later on, I want to apply for a loan for this, or I want to look at some other program financial offerings. So the sooner you get started on that, the more smooth your kind of application and process will be going through the NRCS side. And then other than that, that's all for me, folks. Of course, this is our anti-discrimination statement for USDA, and then a method for filing any grievances concerning discrimination. And then with that, I will take any questions. And let me see here if I can pull up the chat, just in case. Thank you, Paul, for posting that link in here. Looks like Paul's already on it. So let's see. So we have one that was, do NRCS programs apply to new farms? For example, no prior irrigation records, and I'll kind of just Paul's our outreach coordinator here at NRCS for the state of Arizona. I'll kind of read his response out and then see if I need to elaborate on that at all. So NRCS financial programs for existing farmers and ranchers who meet the FSA eligibility criteria for producing farm records and cropping history. So you don't necessarily have to have irrigation records for your property. So those only apply if you are seeking to make irrigation improvements on your property. And so that essentially is saying, even if you have not successfully grown anything, let's say you've tried watering, you've tried growing, you've planted, you've tried watering, and you just haven't been able to get anything to grow. If you can show that you have been doing that for at least 2 of the last 5 years, then we can come in and help you make irrigation improvements. Now, if you're not looking for irrigation improvements, then we don't need to check that. So if you just say, hey, I want to get a high tunnel, then we can come in and help you with that. So hopefully that answers your question. And if not, feel free to either drop another chat in the box or send me an email. Let's see. So can you give some more information on mulching? So with us, mulching tends to be a practice that we can use to address temperature in your soil. We can use it to address soil moisture. And so that's something that I believe we pay by the acreage for larger properties. And we're currently working with our payment schedule when it comes to urban farms to kind of translate a lot of those things to square foot size. So that's something we're in the process of kind of converting, but I'm not sure if we've already moved it to square footage for mulching, but those are kind of like two reasons why we might be using mulching to address resource concerns. So if you're having issues maintaining soil moisture, for example, that's something that we could use to justify incorporating mulching on your farm. Is there any questions from I think that's everything in the chat. Is there any questions from anyone verbally? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, again, if you all think of anything later, I believe Paul also dropped his contact information in the chat as well. So again, he's our state outreach coordinator. And then of course you see my contact information here, or you can go through Taylor and feel free to either give me a call or send me a message and we can get you hooked up. All right. I appreciate everyone. Thank you.